A castle door groans shut, and the echo never returns. History is not just a record of what happened. It is a collection of profound silences where stories simply stop. We are about to walk into those silences. This journey uncovers 25 of history's most baffling disappearances, from vanished Roman legions and missing kings to entire settlements that evaporated into thin air. You will discover the chilling details behind legends that have haunted centuries, learning how a single unexplained vanishing can rewrite our understanding of an era. How does an army of 50,000 men simply vanish into a desert storm? What could make a remote lighthouse, still lit, stand completely empty of its keepers? By the end, you will hold the pieces of these ancient puzzles, seeing the shadowy outlines of mysteries that may never be solved. What do you think is more haunting, the disappearance itself or the endless questions left behind? One of the most persistent whispers from the ancient world belongs to an entire Roman legion. The 9th Legion Hispana, a hardened force of over 5,000 professional soldiers, marched into the mists of northern Britain and never marched out again. Their story is the first great disappearance on our list, a mystery that began in the classical era but whose echo grew louder and more ominous in the medieval mind. Their last clear record places them at a fortress in what is now York, England, around the year 108 AD. They were tasked with the brutal, ongoing pacification of the island, pushing the empire's frontier north into the wild lands of Caledonia, modern Scotland. Then the documentary trail goes cold. By the year 122, when Emperor Hadrian visited Britain and ordered the construction of his famous wall, the 9th was conspicuously absent from the army lists. A legion that had fought for centuries, from the campaigns of Julius Caesar to the grim forests of Germania, had simply vanished from official history. What happened to them? The theories are as varied as they are compelling. The most dramatic suggests a catastrophic ambush. Pictish tribes in the unforgiving highlands could have lured the legion deep into treacherous glens and wiped them out to a man, stripping the bodies and leaving no Roman stone unturned. This idea gave birth to legends of a ghostly army forever marching in the mist, and it fed a medieval belief in the supernatural peril of the northern wilderness. Yet, archaeology has never found the smoking gun, no vast battlefield strewn with Roman armor to confirm such a final battle. Another theory argues they were not destroyed but transferred. Perhaps the 9th was quietly moved to a different, more volatile frontier, like the Rhine or the East, and was disbanded or destroyed there, its fate lost in the broader chaos of the empire's later years. But even this bureaucratic explanation feels unsatisfying because it fails to account for the total silence. A legion's movement was a major logistical event, noted and celebrated. Its dissolution was a significant mark of disgrace or disaster. The true power of this disappearance lies not in a potential historical transfer, but in the legend it became. For medieval chroniclers looking back, the loss of the 9th Legion was a potent symbol. It represented the limits of imperial power, a stark reminder that even Rome's mighty legions could be swallowed whole by the unknown. The wilderness beyond Hadrian's wall was not just a place on a map, it was a realm of monsters, giants, and spirits in the medieval imagination. The vanished legion proved it. Their fate became a cautionary tale about overreach and the hidden dangers that wait at the edge of the known world. So, we are left with a haunting emptiness where a great military force once stood. Whether they fell to Pictish swords, were reassigned into obscurity, or met some other unknown end, the 9th Legion passed from fact into mystery, setting a timeless template for how a disappearance can grow far larger in the telling than it ever was in life. The silence that swallowed a Roman legion was a collective mystery, but sometimes a single missing person can fracture an entire nation's future. In the late 16th century, a young king rode out to forge a holy empire and vanished without a trace. King Sebastian I of Portugal was only 24 years old in the summer of 1578, a devout and fiercely ambitious monarch obsessed with launching a new crusade in North Africa. Against the counsel of his advisors, he personally led a massive expeditionary force across the Mediterranean to challenge the Sultan of Morocco. His target was the fortress of Alcácer Quibir. What followed was not a glorious victory, but a catastrophic defeat. The battle was a brutal disaster for the Portuguese. The king's army was overwhelmed by larger, better-positioned Moroccan forces. In the chaotic retreat and slaughter, King Sebastian was last seen charging deep into the enemy ranks. He never emerged. In the battle's grim aftermath, with thousands dead and thousands more captured for ransom, a critical problem emerged. The king's body could not be found. No royal armor was recovered. No identifiable remains were presented. He was simply gone. This physical absence created a vacuum far more dangerous than any confirmed death. Almost immediately, a strange and powerful legend began to grow among the shattered Portuguese people. They called it Sebastianism. The belief whispered that the young, crusading king had not actually died on that foreign field. Instead, he was merely lost, waiting in some hidden refuge, and he would one day return in a fog-shrouded dawn to reclaim his throne and restore Portugal to its former glory. This was not just folklore, it became a potent national myth that destabilized the kingdom for generations. In the decades that followed, Portugal suffered a succession crisis and was eventually annexed by its neighbor, Spain. In this atmosphere of longing and political despair, the Sebastianist myth found desperate believers, and where there is desperate belief, impostors appear. Several false Sebastians emerged across Europe and even in the colonies. Each man claimed to be the lost king, miraculously escaped from captivity, returning to claim his birthright. These claimants attracted followers, stirred up rebellions, and forced the authorities into elaborate and embarrassing efforts to disprove them, often through trials or interrogations that only fed the public's fascination. The last confirmed sighting of King Sebastian was a moment of battlefield chaos, but his true disappearance was a slow, haunting process that unfolded over 80 years in the hearts of his people. His empty tomb became a symbol of national hope and unresolved trauma, a ghost that walked the halls of Portuguese politics long after the real man was almost certainly gone. How does a king disappear twice, first from a battlefield and then from the finality of history itself? A king's absence could haunt a nation for generations, but an entire community vanishing left a void that echoed across an ocean. In 1587, a ship's captain named John White faced a silence more profound than any battlefield. He was returning to the Roanoke colony, a small English settlement on an island off the coast of present-day North Carolina. He had left his daughter, his infant granddaughter Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, and about 115 other settlers there just 3 years prior. When his ship finally made landfall, he found a scene of utter abandonment. The settlement's wooden palisade stood intact, but the houses within had been carefully dismantled, their timbers removed, suggesting a planned departure, not a panicked flight. There were no graves, no signs of struggle, no bodies. The only clue was a single word carved into a fort post, Croatoan, and the letters Ciaro carved into a nearby tree. The name referred to a nearby island and the Native American tribe that lived there, allies of the settlers. But the colonists themselves were gone, leaving behind only heavy iron tools rusting in the grass and an enduring American mystery. The leading theories each paint a different picture of their fate. The most accepted is peaceful integration. Facing starvation after supply ships were delayed by war with Spain, the colonists may have split into smaller groups and been welcomed by the Croatan people, gradually intermarrying and assimilating into the tribe over generations. Later reports from other English explorers told of grey-eyed natives and villages with 2-story English-style houses in the interior, fueling this hope. A darker possibility is a massacre or capture by a hostile neighboring tribe, though the lack of any evidence of violence at the site argues against a direct attack there. They might have attempted a desperate relocation to the mainland and perished from disease or hunger along the way, but the power of Roanoke is not in picking a single theory. It is in what the disappearance represented. For England and for the world watching, Roanoke was a stark lesson in the terrifying vulnerability of those early European footholds in the New World. An entire community, a living experiment containing families and the symbolic hope of a newborn child, could simply be erased from the edge of the map. The word Croatoan was not just a clue, it was a ghostly signature, a final message swallowed by a vast and indifferent continent. It whispered that the wilderness was not empty and that those who entered it did so at the peril of disappearing from history itself. The New World could swallow a colony whole, but the old world of castles and crowns perfected the art of making rivals vanish from within stone walls. In the spring of 1483, two boys entered the Tower of London and became the most famous missing persons in English history. They were Edward V, aged 12, and his younger brother Richard, Duke of York, aged 9. Their story is the quintessential medieval political mystery, a chilling tale of family betrayal that reshaped a kingdom's destiny. Their father, King Edward IV, had died suddenly, leaving his eldest son as the rightful heir. But the boy king's reign was immediately contested by his powerful uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Claiming he needed to protect the princes from their mother's family, Richard had the boys placed in the Tower, then a royal residence as much as a prison. He then declared their parents' marriage invalid, making the princes illegitimate and clearing his own path to the throne. He was crowned King Richard III. And after that summer, the two princes were never seen in public again. Rumors of their murder spread like a stain. The question that has haunted historians for over 5 centuries is simple: who gave the order? The primary suspect has always been Richard III. He had the motive, the opportunity, and the most to gain from their permanent disappearance. His reputation as a monstrous usurper was cemented just 2 years later when he was killed at the Battle of Bosworth Field by Henry Tudor, who became King Henry VII. But Henry himself is a compelling suspect. The princes were a dynastic threat to his new Tudor reign as well. If they had still been alive when he took the throne, their existence would have undermined his own claim. Some even point to a third possibility: Henry Stafford, the Duke of Buckingham, who was Richard's key ally before turning against him. Could he have acted on his own to destabilize the king? The mystery took a grim turn 2 centuries later. In 1674, workmen renovating a staircase within the tower discovered a wooden chest buried beneath some stone steps. Inside were the skeletons of 2 children. The bones were examined and declared to be those of the missing princes, and they were eventually interred in Westminster Abbey. While modern science has never been allowed to conclusively examine those remains, the discovery seemed to confirm the darkest rumors. This disappearance did more than end 2 young lives, it created an indelible villain. Richard III's historical image was almost entirely shaped by this one act, portrayed by Shakespeare and Tudor propagandists as a hunchbacked monster who would kill his own blood for power. Yet, the lack of a definitive answer has fueled an endless debate. Was Richard a ruthless pragmatist of his time, or a uniquely wicked king framed by his victorious enemies? The princes in the tower remind us that in the medieval world, power was the ultimate truth, and those who stood in its way could be made to disappear, leaving behind only bones and a legacy of whispers. Even royal blood could vanish behind castle walls, but the open sea held a different kind of terror, a vast emptiness that could erase a crew without a trace. Centuries after medieval ships disappeared into uncharted waters, the Atlantic produced a mystery so perfect it became the blueprint for every ghost story ever told. In December 1872, the merchant brigantine Mary Celeste was spotted adrift between the Azores and Portugal. The ship was seaworthy, her sails partly set, and she was fully provisioned with 6 months of food and fresh water in her hold. But her crew of 10, including Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter, were gone. The last lifeboat was missing, suggesting an orderly departure, but nearly everything else remained. The crew's personal belongings, their pipes and clothing, even the captain's navigational instruments and the ship's papers, were all left behind. The logbook's final entry was mundane, noting a position and rough weather days earlier, with nothing to hint at catastrophe. A single, strange detail stood out. One of the ship's pumps had been disassembled, and a long rope was found trailing in the water behind the stern. Why would an experienced captain abandon a perfectly sound vessel? The theories are as numerous as the waves. One popular idea involves the cargo, over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. Perhaps fumes from a leaking barrel built up in the hold, and the captain, fearing a massive explosion, ordered everyone into the lifeboat as a precaution, tethering it to the ship with that trailing rope. If the tether snapped or the barrel never exploded, the lifeboat would have been left to the mercy of the Atlantic, its occupants doomed. Others point to natural phenomena, like a sudden waterspout or a small, localized seaquake that might have convinced the crew the ship was sinking. Piracy was considered, but nothing of value was taken. Mutiny made little sense as the crew left all their possessions. The true power of the Mary Celeste is not in solving the puzzle, but in its pristine, unanswered state. It presented a scene of interrupted life, a snapshot of a moment when 10 people simply stepped off the edge of the world. This single, well-documented case in the age of steam and telegraph crystallized an ancient fear, transforming the medieval concept of a ghost ship into a modern legend. It proved that even with all the trappings of civilization, the sea's old mysteries remained, waiting to swallow the unwary and leave behind only an empty deck and a question hanging in the salt air. The sea could swallow a crew and leave their ship adrift, but what force could empty a lighthouse while its guiding beam still shone? In the winter of 1900, on the desolate Flannan Isles, 15 miles west of Scotland's Outer Hebrides, 3 men vanished from a fortress of light. Thomas Marshall, James Jucat, and Donald MacArthur were experienced stoic keepers, tasked with maintaining the Eilean Moor lighthouse. It was a post defined by its brutal isolation, a granite tower perched on a cliff edge, perpetually battered by Atlantic gales. On December 15th, a passing steamer noted the light was out, a grave and unusual failure. Days later, on December 26th, the relief ship Hesperus arrived with replacement keeper Joseph Moore. What he discovered would become the stuff of maritime legend. The lighthouse gate and main door were unlocked. Inside, the clock had stopped. 2 of the 3 sets of oilskin coats and boots were missing, but 1 set remained on its peg. In the kitchen, an overturned chair lay on the floor. The table was set for a meal that was never eaten. The fire in the grate had gone cold. Up in the lantern room, the lamps were clean and filled, ready to be lit, but the keepers themselves were gone without a trace. The official Board of Trade inquiry, faced with these eerie domestic clues, settled on a tragic but logical explanation. They theorized that one keeper had gone outside, perhaps to secure equipment in a sudden, violent squall. When he was in peril, a second rushed out without his protective gear to help. The third, witnessing both being swept away, then met the same fate in a desperate rescue attempt. This scenario explained the overturned chair, the missing oilskins, and the unlocked door. Yet, the very neatness of this conclusion felt unsatisfying against the profound strangeness of the scene. Why would all 3 experienced men, who knew the lethal power of those cliffs, leave their posts simultaneously during a storm? The untouched meal suggested an interruption so sudden they expected to return. The island itself, steeped in local folklore as a haunted place, the very name Flannan, derived from a 7th century saint, seemed to invite darker speculation. Whispers spoke of malevolent forces, of sea monsters, or of the men being spirited away by supernatural means. More grounded but equally chilling theories emerged of a fight among the keepers, driven to madness by their extreme isolation, with the lone survivor disposing of the others and then casting himself into the sea. Others wondered about a secret, forbidden trip to the island's treacherous western landing platform, where all were caught by a freak wave. The enduring power of the Flannan Isles mystery lies in its stark domestic horror. It was not a ship lost at sea, but a home invaded by the unknown. Here were the mundane details of 3 lives: a chair, a coat, a set table frozen in time. The lighthouse stood as a monument to human order against chaos, yet chaos had entered and taken the men without breaking a single window. Their disappearance asked a haunting question: what terror or duty is so immediate that it makes you walk out of your own life, leaving the door swinging open behind you into a storm? A lighthouse could vanish its keepers, but an entire army can be erased by the desert itself. Our 7th disappearance reaches back to a time when history was first being written, and it concerns a force so vast its loss became a lesson whispered for centuries. In 524 BC, according to the Greek historian Herodotus, the powerful Persian emperor Cambyses II launched a campaign of conquest into Egypt. Victorious, he then turned his gaze to a spiritual target, the famed oracle of Ammon at the remote Siwa oasis, deep in the Libyan desert. The oracle had apparently denied his divine right to rule, and in a fit of rage, Cambyses dispatched a punitive force of 50,000 men to march across the desert, sack the temple, and silence the god's voice forever. Herodotus describes their grim fate. After a grueling 7-day march from their base, the army was resting at a desert stop called the Oasis of the Blessed when a monstrous sandstorm rose from the south. The wind, he wrote, was so immense it buried the entire force beneath dunes, leaving no survivor and no trace. The lost army of Cambyses became one of antiquity's greatest vanishings. For medieval scholars reading Herodotus centuries later, this story was not just a historical curiosity, it was a profound parable. It spoke of the hubris of kings, of the folly of challenging the gods, and of the desert as a living, vengeful force that could swallow the mightiest human endeavors whole. The tale reinforced a medieval world view where nature itself was an active, moral agent punishing those who overreached. But was it true? The search for physical proof has driven explorers and archaeologists for decades. The most tantalizing claim came in 2009, when 2 Italian researchers announced they had found artifacts in the vast Great Sand Sea west of the Siwa oasis. They reported discovering metal fragments, perhaps from weapons or armor, and human bones emerging from beneath a rock outcrop. They suggested these could be the first traces of the lost army. Yet the discovery was met with immediate and deep skepticism from the broader archaeological community. No major peer-reviewed excavation followed. Critics pointed out the extreme difficulty of preserving organic material like bone in such an environment for 2,500 years, and the likelihood that scattered metal could come from any number of later desert travelers. The site has never been conclusively verified. This leaves us with a fascinating duality. On one hand, the story has all the hallmarks of a moral fable. Cambyses was historically known for his impiety and madness in later accounts, so attributing to him a divinely punished expedition fit a neat narrative arc. The round number of 50,000 men feels symbolic, and the total supernatural obliteration by a sandstorm serves as a perfect cosmic revenge. On the other hand, the desert is a brutally efficient tomb. An army of that size taking a wrong turn or caught in a true haboob could indeed perish and be scattered and buried within hours, leaving no monument but shifting sand. So did 50,000 Persians truly vanish in a single afternoon of howling wind? Or did Herodotus, gathering stories decades later, transform a smaller, tragic logistical disaster into a timeless myth about pride and punishment? The sands hold their secret tightly, reminding us that some disappearances live on not because we find evidence, but because the story of their vanishing is too powerful to ever be buried. The desert could erase an army with a single storm, but a century ago, a different kind of silence fell over a frozen lake in Canada. In November 1930, a fur trapper named Joe Labelle walked into a scene that felt ripped from an older, darker time. He was following a familiar trail to an Inuit fishing village on the remote shores of Angakuni Lake in the Northwest Territories, a community he had traded with for years. As he approached, the profound quiet warned him something was wrong. No children laughed, no dogs barked, no smoke rose from the stone hearths. The village was utterly deserted. Stepping into the empty tents and cabins, Labelle found a tableau of interrupted life that chilled him to the bone. Pots of caribou stew, now frozen solid, still hung over cold fire pits. Personal belongings, including valuable rifles that no hunter would ever willingly abandon, lay beside sleeping mats. The community's sled dogs, their only means of winter travel, were found tethered to a tree, dead from starvation. Most haunting of all, Labelle reported discovering a line of graves at the village edge that had been opened from the inside, as if something within had pushed its way out. The story, when it reached the newspapers, became a sensational modern legend, a ghost village mystery for the industrial age. The theories spun were wide and wild. Some suggested a sudden, panicked evacuation due to an unknown disease or a terrifying predator. Others whispered of forced relocation by outside authorities, though no record existed. The opened graves fueled rampant supernatural speculation. Tales of ancient spirits or otherworldly abductions that echoed medieval fears of the wilderness. Yet, like many such vanishings, the Angakuni Lake story is layered with doubt. Later investigators and historians have pointed out significant problems. No official police report has ever been found. The region was sparsely populated, and the village's exact size and even its permanent existence have been questioned. Many details, particularly the exhumed graves, bear the hallmarks of sensational newspaper embellishment, common in the era of pulp mysteries. So what truly happened? The most plausible explanation is a slow, tragic dispersal, not a single dramatic event. The Inuit of the region were highly mobile, following game and fish. A poor season, combined with the encroachment of the fur trade and new diseases, could have forced the community to break apart gradually, with families leaving at different times for other camps or trading posts. What Labelle might have found was the final, abandoned camp of the last holdouts, their dogs dead, their belongings left for a return that never came. The power of Angakuni Lake, however, lies not in forensic truth, but in its narrative grip. It transplanted the medieval fear of a community swallowed by the unknown into the 20th century. In an age of radios and railroads, here was a place where people could still vanish, leaving only a cold pot over a dead fire. It became a cautionary tale about the fragility of life at the edge of the map, a reminder that isolation is its own kind of timeless wilderness. Fire can erase a home in minutes, but the questions it leaves behind can burn for a lifetime. On Christmas Eve, 1945, in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, George and Jenny Sodder put their 9 children to bed in their 2-story home. Just past 1 in the morning, Jenny was jolted awake by the smell of smoke and the sound of a thud on the roof. The house was on fire. In the frantic chaos that followed, George and Jenny managed to escape with 4 of their children. But 5 others, ranging in age from 5 to 14, were trapped upstairs. George raced to get the extension ladder he always kept propped against the house. It was gone. He tried to drive his coal truck up to the 2nd floor to use as a platform, but the engine, which had worked perfectly that afternoon, would not start. He tried to call for help. The telephone line was dead, later found to have been cut. Neighbors arrived, but without a ladder, they could only watch in horror as the roof collapsed into the inferno. By dawn, the house was a smoldering ruin. firemen sifted through the ashes, expecting to find the tiny bones of the 5 missing children. They found nothing. No teeth, no skeletal remains, nothing that could be identified as a human child. The county sheriff hastily declared the case closed, stating the intense heat had completely cremated the bodies. But George Sodder, a tough, practical man, knew that was impossible. He had worked with coal and fire his whole life. He knew that household fires, even very hot ones, do not vaporize bone and tooth enamel. His disbelief hardened into a terrible conviction. His children had not died in that fire. They had been taken. The bizarre clues piled up. A witness came forward saying he had seen the children peering from a car window earlier that night. A strange man had been asking about the Sodder family's routines in the days before the fire. Most chillingly, the family received a mysterious photograph in the mail years later, showing a young man who bore a striking resemblance to their missing son, Louis. On the back was written, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie." The family spent the rest of their lives and their entire savings searching for answers, turning their property into a billboard pleading for information. They believed it was a kidnapping, perhaps motivated by George's outspoken criticism of local figures, or by a bitter comment he once made about the Italian dictator Mussolini to a stranger. The case is a perfect, painful storm of tragedy and mystery. It sits at the crossroads of a straightforward, awful accident and a dark, elaborate conspiracy. The official explanation feels insufficient, leaving gaping holes in logic, while the kidnapping theory requires a plot of sinister complexity. The Sodder children's disappearance asks us where we place our faith, in the cold conclusions of authority, or in a parent's unshakable instinct that a mother would know, would feel in her soul if her children had died just feet away from her. Their empty graves are a monument to a hope that refused to burn. A parent's hope can defy a fire, but history can erase a creator before his creation is ever seen. Louis Le Prince was on the cusp of immortality in September 1890. The French inventor had built and patented a single-lens motion picture camera, and he had already captured the world's first true moving images on film, a few serene seconds of traffic on Leeds Bridge in England. He was preparing to travel to New York City for a grand public demonstration, a moment that would undoubtedly crown him as the father of cinema. Then he took a train. On September 16th, after visiting a friend in Dijon, France, Louis Le Prince boarded the afternoon express to Paris, where he planned to see his brother before sailing to America. He placed his luggage, including his precious equipment and patent papers, into the carriage. His brother was waiting at the Paris station. The train arrived. But Louis Le Prince was not on it. He had simply vanished from the moving train between Dijon and Paris. No one saw him get off. No one witnessed a struggle. His luggage, still in the baggage car, was the only proof he had ever been aboard. An extensive search of the railway line and the surrounding countryside found nothing. No body, no personal effects, no clue. The man who had captured time itself in a sequence of frames was now a blank space in history. The theories around his disappearance are a perfect storm of intrigue and irony. The most dramatic points directly to his rival, Thomas Edison. Edison was feverishly working on his own motion picture devices at the same time and was engaged in fierce patent wars across the Atlantic. Just 2 years after Le Prince vanished, Edison would publicly debut the kinetoscope, claiming the spotlight and the historical title. Could agents working for Edison or other business rivals have orchestrated a murder to remove the French inventor from the race? It is a compelling narrative of industrial espionage, a dark prequel to the birth of Hollywood. Others suggest suicide, perhaps driven by financial pressure or fear of failure, though his family insisted he was in high spirits and excited for his trip. There is even the possibility of a deliberate, staged disappearance, a man walking away from his own life to escape debt or obligation, though abandoning his life's work on the eve of triumph seems unthinkable. The profound irony is inescapable. Louis Le Prince invented a technology designed to preserve moments, to defy disappearance by fixing light and motion onto a permanent strip of celluloid. Yet he himself became a phantom, a missing piece of film in his own story. His family fought for decades to have his patents recognized, but without the inventor present to champion his work, history's narrative was written by those who remained. So we are left with a haunting question. Did the birth of moving pictures require a sacrifice? The man who should have been the first star of the cinematic age instead became its first and most profound mystery, a ghost in the machine he created. The man who invented moving pictures vanished into thin air, but sometimes an entire squadron can disappear from the sky in broad daylight. On December 5, 1945, 5 United States Navy TBM Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on a routine navigation and bombing run. It was a simple, triangular training route over the Atlantic. The squadron, designated Flight 19, was led by an experienced instructor, Lieutenant Charles Taylor. The weather was clear, the seas were calm. Everything was, by all accounts, perfectly normal. Then it wasn't. About 90 minutes into the flight, a confused series of radio transmissions began crackling back to the base. Lieutenant Taylor's voice was tense. He reported that his compasses were not working. He could not be sure of his position. "I do not know where we are," he said. "We must have got lost after that last turn." The tower tried to guide him, instructing him to fly west toward the setting sun, but Taylor's replies grew more desperate. He insisted they were over the Gulf of Mexico, not the Atlantic, a fundamental disorientation. "We cannot be sure of any direction," he transmitted. "Everything is wrong. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should." The last fragmented signals from Flight 19 were ghostly. "All planes close up tight," he ordered his student pilots. "We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first engine starts coughing, go down together. Then only static." A massive sea and air search was launched immediately. It involved hundreds of ships and aircraft combing thousands of square miles of ocean. Then another layer of mystery was added. One of the search planes, a PBM Mariner flying boat with 13 crewmen aboard, radioed its position and then vanished completely as well. A merchant ship later reported seeing a tremendous burst of flame in the sky at the time and place the Mariner would have been. Not a single trace of the 6 aircraft or their 27 men was ever found. The official Navy investigation concluded that Lieutenant Taylor, possibly disoriented by a malfunctioning compass, had mistakenly led his flight east, deep into the open Atlantic, until they ran out of fuel and ditched in stormy seas. The loss of the Mariner was attributed to a catastrophic mechanical failure, as those aircraft were known for fuel vapor leaks. Case closed on paper. But the public imagination refused to accept such a mundane end for such a dramatic, multi-layered tragedy. The location of the disappearance, a stretch of ocean between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, already had a faintly sinister reputation among sailors. Flight 19 became the catalyst, the single event that crystallized all those old mariners' tales into a modern legend. It was the perfect storm of mystery, experienced pilots, multiple planes, failed technology, strange radio chatter, and a fruitless search that itself suffered loss. The story provided all the eerie details needed to birth the Bermuda Triangle mythos. People asked, how could 5 robust warplanes, equipped with life rafts and radios, vanish without a single debris field? How could an experienced pilot not recognize the Florida coastline? The official explanation of human error felt insufficient against the scale of the silence. So the void was filled with speculation, magnetic anomalies, rogue waves, alien abduction, or gates to another dimension. Flight 19's true legacy is not in the naval report, but in the shadow it cast. It transformed a geographic area into a cultural icon of the unknown, proving that even in the age of radar and radio, the map could still hold places where the rules of reality seemed to quietly and terrifyingly suspend themselves. A squadron can vanish from the sky, but 3 children disappeared from a sunny beach in the space of an afternoon, and a nation's innocence vanished with them. On Australia Day, January 26, 1966, the Beaumont children asked their mother if they could take the bus to Glenelg Beach, a short trip from their Adelaide home. It was a familiar journey for the responsible 9-year-old Jane, her 7-year-old sister Anna, and their 4-year-old brother Grant. Their mother, Nancy Beaumont, agreed, expecting them back on the 3:45 bus. The bus came and went. Her children did not get off. That simple, empty moment began one of the most extensive and heartbreaking manhunts in Australian history. Witnesses placed the children at the beach playing near the sandhills. Several people recalled seeing them with a tall, slender, blonde man in his mid-30s wearing blue swimming trunks. The man appeared friendly, joining in their games. He was seen later buying pastries with the children and finally walking with them away from the beach, hand in hand, as if they were all the best of friends. Then they were gone. The scale of the search was unprecedented. Police combed the coastline, dredged waterways, and followed thousands of leads. The children's faces stared from every newspaper and poster, a haunting triptych of smiles that became synonymous with a new kind of fear. The case quickly zeroed in on the mysterious blonde man, but without a clear name or face, he was a ghost. Years later, a prime suspect emerged from the shadows of other crimes. Bevan Spencer von Einem was already serving a life sentence for the horrific murder of a 15-year-old boy in 1984. His modus operandi and his known haunts near Glenelg placed him firmly in the frame. Witnesses even identified him from old photographs as the man on the beach. Yet, conclusive evidence never materialized. Crucial files from the original investigation were reportedly lost or destroyed. Key witnesses died. Von Einem himself never confessed, and without the children's bodies, a prosecution was impossible. The failure to solve the case was compounded by a growing belief that police had mishandled early leads, perhaps too quickly dismissing the significance of the blonde man's sighting in the initial critical hours. The disappearance of Jane, Anna, and Grant Beaumont did more than shatter a single family. It fractured the social fabric of an entire country. Before that day, it was common for Australian children to roam their neighborhoods and beaches with a degree of freedom that now seems unthinkable. The Beaumont case ended that era overnight. It introduced a new vocabulary of caution to parents, a constant, low-grade anxiety about strangers and public spaces. The story became a national trauma, a shared loss that never healed because it never found an ending. Where are they? The question hangs in the Australian sun, as bright and painful as it was in 1966. It is a mystery built not on ancient legend, but on the most modern and intimate of horrors, the trust of a child and the empty space where they once stood. A child's trust can be stolen on a crowded beach, but what happens when a stranger arrives from a place that does not exist? In the summer of 1954, at Tokyo's bustling Haneda Airport, customs officials encountered a man who would become the star of a truly surreal mystery. He was Caucasian, well-dressed, and spoke fluent French and Japanese. When asked his nationality, he presented a passport from a country called Tord. He claimed it was a sovereign nation nestled in the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain, a principality with a 1,000-year history. The officials, understandably baffled, pulled out a map. They pointed to the microstate of Andorra in that exact location. The man became agitated, insisting his country was Tord, not Andorra, and that the map was wrong. His conviction was backed by physical evidence. He carried driver's licenses, checkbooks, and currency, all issued by the fictional-sounding nation. Nothing about him seemed like a typical tourist or a disoriented traveler. He was a man with a complete, coherent, and utterly impossible backstory. The authorities, suspecting either forgery or something far stranger, detained him. They placed him in a hotel room adjacent to the airport, with 2 guards posted outside his door until the matter could be resolved. In the morning, when officials entered the room, it was empty. The man was gone, the window was locked from the inside, and the guards swore no one had entered or left. All of his belongings, including the perplexing Tord passport and currency, remained behind. He had evaporated from a sealed room. The theories surrounding this case are a fascinating spectrum, from the mundane to the mind-bending. The most grounded explanation is that he was a sophisticated fugitive or con artist using an elaborately forged identity. Perhaps the Tord documents were part of an intricate financial scam or a way to evade authorities from a real country. When he realized his ruse was unraveling under official scrutiny, he somehow bribed the guards or used a hidden skill to escape, abandoning the incriminating evidence. Yet the details challenge this. Why create a country that could be instantly disproven by any atlas? Why carry such a complete yet easily falsifiable fictional identity? This leads to the more exotic interpretations. For many, the man from Tord is the ultimate glitch in the Matrix story, a tale of interdimensional travel. The theory suggests he was a person from a parallel reality where Tord was a real country, a world nearly identical to ours except for that one geographical difference. Through some cosmic slip, he crossed over, only to find himself trapped in a universe that had no record of his home. His panic and confusion were genuine because to him, his reality was the true one. His disappearance, perhaps whatever quantum doorway he stumbled through, opened once more, pulling him back to his own dimension. There is also the possibility of a psychological break, a man suffering from a profound and detailed delusion who managed to slip away during a moment of guard inattention. Regardless of the truth, the story's enduring power lies in its perfect, eerie simplicity. It is not about a missing person, but about an impossible person. He presented a puzzle that was not a whodunit, but a what is this. His vanishing act completed the mystery, transforming him from a man with a wrong answer into a permanent question mark. He asked us to consider, what if a single, confident stranger could prove for just a moment that our entire world's map was incorrect? The idea of a single missing person is haunting, but the legend of a missing continent has captivated humanity for millennia. Disappearance number 14 is not a historical fact, but the most famous vanishing act in all of human storytelling, the lost city of Atlantis. Its power lies not in evidence, but in the profound yearning it represents. The story comes to us from the Greek philosopher Plato, writing around 360 BC in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias. He describes Atlantis not as a myth, but as a historical account passed down from wise ancestors. Atlantis was a vast, powerful island kingdom located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Its people were advanced, wealthy, and militarily formidable, with a magnificent capital city built from concentric rings of water and land. But their virtue turned to arrogance. They became corrupt and launched an unprovoked war against the ancient nations of the Mediterranean. And then, as Plato chillingly writes, in a single day and night of misfortune, the entire island sank into the sea and vanished. He dates this cataclysm to around 9600 BC, a time so distant it feels like the dawn of the world. So, was Atlantis real? Most scholars agree Plato was likely using a fictional tale to make a philosophical point about the moral decay of societies and the wrath of the gods. Yet, the sheer specificity of his description has launched 1,000 searches. The most compelling theory points to a real historical disaster, the Minoan eruption of the volcanic island Thera, modern Santorini, around 1600 BC. This was one of the largest volcanic events in human history. It devastated the sophisticated Minoan civilization on Crete with tsunamis and ash, potentially inspiring tales of a great maritime power wiped out by the sea. Others look to geography, like the Richat structure in Mauritania, a striking natural formation of concentric rings in the desert that, from above, looks eerily like Plato's description. Some suggest it was a memory of the wealthy, mysterious Tartessos civilization in southern Spain, a trading culture that faded from history, but the truth is, finding a physical match is almost secondary. Atlantis endures because it is the ultimate metaphor. It represents our collective fascination with a lost golden age, a time of greater knowledge and harmony that was snatched away by nature's fury. It is a permanent warning about hubris, a reminder that no civilization, no matter how advanced, is immune to catastrophe. Every sunken ship, every ruined city we discover whispers the name Atlantis. It is the ghost of every culture that ever believed itself eternal, only to be reclaimed by the earth or the sea. The real mystery is why we keep looking for it, perhaps because finding it would mean that such perfection once existed, and its loss would make our own fragile world feel just a little more precious. Atlantis may be a lost idea, but the Amber Room was a vanished treasure you could touch. This was a physical masterpiece, an entire chamber where the walls themselves were made of solidified sunlight. Crafted in the early 18th century, the room was a collaboration between German and Russian artisans, a gift to Tsar Peter the Great. It consisted of over 6 tons of meticulously carved amber panels, backed with gold leaf and framed by ornate mirrors and gilded wood. When candlelight hit it, the room was said to glow with a warm, magical radiance, a breathtaking symbol of opulence and artistic alliance. For 2 centuries, it stood in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg, a wonder of the world. Then came the war. In 1941, as Nazi forces besieged Leningrad, they specifically targeted the palace. Specialists from the German army's Kunstschutz unit, tasked with cultural plunder, carefully dismantled the entire Amber Room. They packed the fragile panels into 27 crates and shipped them west to Königsberg, modern Kaliningrad, for display in the city's Castle Museum. This is the last place the world can agree the Amber Room truly existed. By 1944, with Soviet forces advancing and Allied bombers raining fire on East Prussia, Königsberg became a city of chaos and flame. In the final days of the war, the castle itself was heavily damaged by British air raids and fierce ground fighting. After the Soviet Red Army captured the smoldering ruins, the Amber Room was nowhere to be found. The crates had simply disappeared from the face of the earth. The leading theory is the simplest and most tragic, that the priceless panels were destroyed in the intense fire that gutted Königsberg Castle. Amber is fossilized tree resin, and it is highly flammable. A single incendiary bomb could have reduced 6 tons of art to ash and molten gold in minutes. Yet, the lack of any conclusive debris has kept hope and conspiracy alive for decades. Perhaps Nazi officials, seeing the end coming, hid the crates in a secret bunker or mine shaft in the surrounding countryside. Expeditions have searched countless lakes, tunnels, and salt mines across Poland, Germany, and the Czech Republic, following tantalizing clues and dead-end leads. Others believe the room was loaded onto a ship like the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was sunk in the Baltic Sea, taking its secret to a watery grave. There is even a dark rumor that Soviet soldiers who first looted the room may have later accidentally destroyed it, covering their tracks with the story of Nazi theft. The Amber Room's disappearance is a double loss. It is the physical absence of a sublime work of human hands, but also the theft of beauty itself by the machinery of war. Its ghost haunts every treasure hunter's dream and every museum's vault. We are left with a replica, a stunning reconstruction completed in 2003 at the Catherine Palace, which only highlights the aching void left by the original. The true room is out there somewhere, perhaps in pieces in a flooded mine, or as smoke in the memory of a burning castle, a permanent reminder that some vanishings are not just of people but of light. Gold can turn a mountain into a graveyard. In the blistering heat of Arizona's Superstition Mountains lies a legend that has consumed men's lives for over a century, a story of a lost mine so rich it seems to bleed gold. The legend centers on a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz, though everyone called him the Dutchman. In 1891, as he lay dying in Phoenix, he supposedly whispered cryptic directions to a caregiver, describing a canyon with a distinctive landmark called the Weaver's Needle, where a fabulously rich vein of gold ore could be simply pulled from the earth. He claimed it was the old Peralta mine, belonging to a wealthy Mexican family who had worked it for generations before being massacred by Apaches. With his final breath, Waltz bequeathed not wealth but a deadly riddle. Since that day, the hunt for the lost Dutchman's mine has become an American obsession, a siren song sung in the key of greed and desperation. Prospectors have poured into the superstitions with maps drawn from rumor and dreams. The terrain itself is a brutal adversary, a jagged labyrinth of canyons and cliffs where summer temperatures soar past 110 degrees. Many who entered seeking a fortune instead found a cryptic end. Some simply vanished, their camps discovered empty, their fate a mystery swallowed by the desert silence. Others were found dead under suspicious circumstances, victims of falls, exposure, or violence, their notes and maps often missing. The mountain seemed to guard its secret with a malevolent will, earning a reputation as cursed ground. So, what is really hidden in those barren peaks? Historians suggest several layers of truth beneath the legend. There were indeed Peralta family mining expeditions from Sonora, Mexico, into Arizona in the mid-1800s. Small, rich pockets of gold, called placer deposits, have been found throughout the region. It is likely Jacob Waltz did find one of these pockets, perhaps even a small, hidden vein, and his dying boasts inflated its size into the stuff of myth. Another theory posits that the lost mine is not a single location, but a narrative magnet. Over decades, stories of every small strike, every prospector's tall tale, and every unexplained death in the mountains were drawn together and attached to the most compelling name, the Dutchman. The legend grew because it fulfilled a deep need, the eternal promise of the frontier that immense wealth was still out there, waiting for one lucky or stubborn soul. The lost Dutchman's mine is therefore more than a geological mystery. It is a psychological one. It represents the dangerous allure of the shortcut, the dream that one gamble, one trek into the wilderness can rewrite a destiny. The mountain does not hide a mine so much as it holds a mirror, reflecting back the relentless, often fatal, optimism of those who believe that the greatest treasures are always just over the next ridge, in the one canyon they have not yet searched. Gold lures men into the desert, but a coded note led investigators into a maze of ice and fire. In late November 1970, two hikers in Norway's Isdalen Valley, a stark, beautiful place known as the Ice Valley, found a woman's body lying among the rocks. She had been badly burned, as if by an intense, localized fire, yet the surrounding grass was untouched. This was only the first of many chilling details. Her fingerprints had been sanded off, meticulously removed to prevent identification. All the labels had been cut from her expensive clothing and luggage. In her possession were multiple fake passports, wigs, and substantial amounts of cash in several European currencies. She was a ghost before she even died. The police dubbed her the Isdal Woman. As they pieced together her final weeks, a portrait of a shadow life emerged. Using the aliases from her passports, they traced her movements across Europe. She had been a constant traveler, staying in hotels from Geneva to Paris, always paying in cash, often changing rooms shortly after check-in. She spoke several languages and was meticulous about covering her tracks. Most hauntingly, investigators found a cryptic handwritten note in her belongings, filled with a series of letters and numbers that resembled a code. It was later deciphered as a list of dates, cities, and flight numbers, a secretive itinerary. The leading theory, given the time and her methods, points directly to the shadow world of Cold War espionage. The year was 1970, the height of tensions between East and West. Norway, a NATO member bordering the Soviet Union, was a hotbed of intelligence activity. The Isdal Woman fit the profile of a courier or an agent perfectly, a lone operative moving between dead drops and safe houses. Her horrific death suggests not an accident but a termination. She may have been discovered by the opposition or, more chillingly, betrayed and eliminated by her own handlers to protect a larger operation. The burned body and removed fingerprints were not just to hide her identity, but to erase her entire existence from the record. Yet other possibilities linger. Could she have been a victim of a sophisticated criminal enterprise, perhaps involved in smuggling or fraud? Or was she a woman fleeing a tragic past, someone who had constructed an elaborate new identity only to meet a violent end at the hands of someone from her former life? Despite decades of investigation, advanced forensic techniques, and international appeals, her true name and mission have never been uncovered. The Isdal woman remains Norway's most famous unsolved death, a stark monument to the Cold War's hidden human cost. She is a reminder that some disappearances are carefully, professionally engineered, leaving behind not a legend of lost gold, but a perfectly constructed void where a person used to be. The Isdal woman's story was a mystery of erasure, but some disappearances are born from a singular, consuming vision. British explorer Percy Fawcett was convinced the Amazon rainforest held a secret that would rewrite history. After years of mapping the continent's uncharted interior, he became obsessed with the idea of a lost, sophisticated civilization he called simply Z. He believed its ruins lay deep in Brazil's Mato Grosso region, a place of impenetrable jungle, hostile tribes, and diseases that had claimed countless lives. In April 1925, Fawcett embarked on his final quest to find it. His team was intensely personal, just himself, his 21-year-old son Jack, and Jack's best friend, Rolly Rimmel. They were last seen alive by a group of native guides at a place they called Dead Horse Camp. Fawcett sent a final, hopeful letter back with the guides, stating they were crossing into unexplored territory and expected to be out of contact for years. Then the green curtain of the Amazon closed behind them forever. The silence that followed was profound, but it was not empty. Fawcett's fame and the romantic nature of his quest sparked a wave of rescue attempts. Over the next 2 decades, more than 100 explorers would vanish or die in the Amazon while trying to find traces of the Fawcett party. One search leader, a journalist named Albert de Winton, was himself never seen again. Another, the adventurer Peter Fleming, later wrote of the sheer, soul-crushing difficulty of the search, finding only false leads and dead ends. These compounding tragedies did not solve the mystery, they amplified it, transforming Percy Fawcett from a missing man into a permanent legend, a symbol of the jungle's ultimate power to consume those who dared to uncover its secrets. The most likely explanation is a grimly simple one. The trio probably fell victim to any of the Amazon's countless dangers: disease, starvation, an accident, or an attack by one of the isolated indigenous groups who saw them as invaders. Yet for decades, the lack of evidence allowed wilder stories to flourish. Some said Fawcett had gone mad and founded a jungle commune. Others claimed he had found his city and chosen to live there, never to return to the modern world. The true twist in this tale came long after the explorers were gone. In the 21st century, modern archaeology, using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, began to reveal something astonishing. The Amazon was not a pristine wilderness, but a carefully managed landscape. Researchers discovered evidence of vast, complex settlements, complete with roads, plazas, and sophisticated earthworks supporting populations in the tens of thousands. These were the garden cities of the pre-Columbian world, civilizations that had risen, thrived, and faded long before European contact. Percy Fawcett, it turns out, was not chasing a fantasy. His theory of a lost Amazonian civilization, though wrong in its specific details, was fundamentally correct. He had sensed the truth hidden beneath the canopy. His tragic disappearance became the dramatic human cost of that search. A man who vanished into the very mystery he was trying to solve, only to be vindicated by science a century later. His empty map is a reminder that sometimes the greatest discoveries are made not by those who return, but by the legends they leave behind. A remote farm can hold a silence more terrifying than any jungle. In the spring of 1922, the Gruber family lived and worked at Hinterkaifeck, a lonely cluster of buildings nestled in the woods of Bavaria. For days before the end, they were haunted by small, inexplicable terrors. The owner, Andreas Gruber, told neighbors he had found footprints in the snow leading from the forest to his farmhouse, but none leading away. He heard footsteps moving in the attic above the family's bedrooms at night. A strange newspaper, one they had not purchased, was found on the property. The family's young maid, so frightened by these occurrences, had quit just days earlier. A new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived on March 31st, a Friday, to take her place. It was the last day any of them would be seen alive. For the next several days, heavy snow fell, sealing the farm off from the world. When neighbors finally grew concerned and ventured through the drifts on April 4th, they discovered a scene of almost unimaginable horror. All 6 inhabitants were dead. Andreas and his wife Casilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, Victoria's 2 children, 7-year-old Casilia and 2-year-old Joseph, and the new maid Maria had been killed with a mattock, a common farming tool. The murders were brutally efficient, yet the aftermath was what chilled investigators to their core. Evidence suggested the killer or killers had not fled immediately. The livestock in the barn had been fed and cared for in the days following the murders. Someone had taken food from the pantry. Smoke was seen rising from the farm's chimney by a neighbor days after the family was already dead. It appeared the murderer had remained at the scene, living calmly alongside the bodies of the victims for up to 3 days before vanishing back into the snowy woods. The suspect list was long and frustrating. A former farmhand, deeply resentful after a dispute over wages, was a prime candidate. A traveling salesman seen in the area was another. Even Victoria's husband, who had supposedly died years earlier in the war, was rumored to be alive and seeking revenge over a paternity dispute involving little Joseph. But with forensic science in its infancy and the scene contaminated by the weather and those first discoverers, no conclusive proof was ever found. The case was officially closed in 1955, the files archived, the mystery left to fester. Hinterkaifeck feels like a medieval peasant tragedy, a folktale of violence emerging from the dark forest. It lacks the grand politics of vanished kings or the scale of a lost legion. This is a story of intimate terror, of a predator who not only invaded a home but then made themselves at home within the carnage. It asks a question that echoes far beyond that Bavarian wood. How does evil become so comfortable that it sits down to eat at the table it has just set with death? A farmhouse held a private horror, but the sky could broadcast a mystery live over the airwaves. On the night of October 21st, 1978, 20-year-old Frederick Valentich took off from a small airport in Melbourne, Australia, for a routine training flight across the bay straight to King Island. He was an aspiring commercial pilot flying a single-engine Cessna 182, a journey he had made before. The sky was clear, the conditions were perfect. About halfway through his flight, he radioed air traffic control in Melbourne with a calm, curious request. He asked if there were any other known aircraft in his vicinity at 5,000 feet. The controller checked and replied that there were none. Valentich's next transmission changed everything. His voice grew tense. He reported a large, unidentified aircraft with 4 bright landing lights that had just passed about 1,000 feet above him. He described it as long and metallic with a green light and said it was orbiting his position. Then he uttered the words that would echo for decades. "It's hovering and it's not an aircraft." The controller, baffled, asked for clarification. Valentich's replies became increasingly frantic. He reported that the strange craft was now approaching him from the east. He said his own engine was beginning to cough and run roughly, a symptom of failure. For 17 seconds, the transmission filled with a loud, metallic scraping sound. Then Valentich's final, chilling words came through. "Melbourne, that strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It is hovering and it's not an aircraft." The transmission ended with silence. An extensive air and sea search was launched across the Bass Strait, one of the most treacherous stretches of water in the world. Not a single piece of wreckage from Valentich's Cessna was ever found. No oil slick, no floating debris, nothing. The official investigation by the Department of Transport concluded that the most likely explanation was pilot disorientation. They suggested that the inexperienced Valentich, flying at night over featureless water, may have become spatially confused. He could have mistakenly seen the lights of Venus or Jupiter, or even his own plane's reflection on the water as a pursuing craft. In this state of vertigo, they theorized, he might have inadvertently put his plane into a dive and crashed into the sea, with the impact explaining the final metallic noise. Yet for many, this explanation feels hollow against the stark clarity of the radio transcript. Valentich's descriptions were specific and sequential, not the panicked ramblings of a disoriented man. He reported clear, interactive movements from the object, and the coinciding engine trouble suggested a physical interaction. The total absence of wreckage is also deeply unusual for a crash in relatively shallow coastal waters. This void gave rise to the other, more spectacular theory that Frederick Valentich was the victim of an unidentified flying object. Enthusiasts point to his own testimony as the best evidence, a pilot describing in real time a craft that defied known aeronautics. The idea of an abduction or an intentional interference by a non-human technology offers a dramatic, if unsettling, answer to both his disappearance and the lack of physical evidence. The power of this case lies in its terrifying intimacy. We are not looking at a distant legend or a centuries-old manuscript. We are listening to a young man's voice in real time describing his own vanishing act. He narrated the approach of the unknown until the moment it swallowed him and his plane whole. It forces us to ask, do we trust the cold logic of human error, or do we lend credence to the final, frightened words of a pilot who insisted until the very end that what he saw was not an aircraft? A pilot's voice can vanish from the radio, but the sea can silence an entire city of steel. In July 1909, the SS Waratah, a brand new state-of-the-art passenger liner, set sail from Sydney, Australia, bound for London. She was a floating palace of her era, over 460 feet long, equipped with electric lights and luxurious accommodations for her 211 passengers and crew. Her journey was meant to be a triumphant demonstration of Australian maritime prowess. Instead, it became a ghost story. The Waratah was last positively seen on the morning of July 27th, steaming past a coastal steamer called the Clan McIntyre off the treacherous coast of South Africa's Wild Coast. The captain of the Clan McIntyre noted the Waratah was laboring heavily in a fierce storm, but she was making headway. He exchanged signals, and then the larger ship vanished into the rain and spray. She was never seen again. No distress call was ever received. No lifeboats, no deck chairs, no flotsam from a vessel of that size ever washed ashore. The Waratah and every soul aboard had been utterly erased from the surface of the Indian Ocean. The subsequent inquiry and a century of speculation have centered on a few terrifying possibilities, each rooted in the brutal physics of the sea. The first is catastrophic structural failure. The Waratah was a new design, and some later testimonies from passengers on her earlier leg suggested she felt unstable, rolling heavily in calm seas. Perhaps the storm's immense power found a fatal weakness in her hull or her longitudinal strength, causing her to simply break in two and sink before anyone could reach a radio. Another theory focuses on her cargo. She was carrying a large amount of lead concentrate, a dense, heavy material. If it shifted suddenly in the storm, it could have caused the ship to list violently and capsize in a matter of seconds, again offering no time for a distress signal. But the most haunting explanation involves a phenomenon sailors had long whispered about, but which science would only later confirm the rogue wave. Off the coast of South Africa, the Agulhas current flows swiftly south, directly against the prevailing storm winds from the south. This clash can create waves of monstrous, abnormal height, solitary walls of water over 100 feet tall. It is conceivable that the Waratah, already battling a severe storm, was struck broadside by such a freak wave. The force could have rolled the ship completely over or driven her under in a single, devastating plunge. The complete absence of wreckage supports this idea. A wave of that power could have smashed the vessel into sinking debris too small to ever be identified. Dubbed Australia's Titanic, though she vanished 3 years before that famous disaster, the Waratah's mystery is in many ways more profound. The Titanic left a field of wreckage, lifeboats, and a clear narrative of collision. The Waratah left only a question mark on a stormy horizon. Her disappearance forced a grim acknowledgement that even in the age of steam and telegraph, the ocean could still perform a perfect vanishing act, swallowing a modern Leviathan whole without leaving a single clue behind. A ship can vanish in a modern storm, but an entire order of warrior monks disappeared in a single, brutal night. King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt and coveting their wealth, moved against the Knights Templar with terrifying efficiency. On Friday, October 13, 1307, his officers across France simultaneously arrested hundreds of Templars, charging them with heresy and blasphemy. It was a meticulously planned strike to seize their legendary treasure, a fortune rumored to include not just gold and jewels pillaged from the Holy Land, but sacred relics like the Holy Grail or even the Ark of the Covenant. The king's men rushed to the Templar headquarters in Paris, the mighty temple fortress, expecting to find vaults overflowing with wealth. Instead, they discovered chambers that were nearly empty. The vast treasure had vanished. According to the chronicles, the Templars had been warned. The evening before the arrests, a convoy of heavily laden carts was seen leaving the temple, escorted by knights, slipping away into the autumn darkness. The physical order was shattered, its leaders burned at the stake, but its greatest asset had already disappeared. This single, documented emptiness ignited a firestorm of legend that burns to this day. Where did the treasure go? One enduring tale claims it was smuggled across the sea to Scotland. With the order outlawed across Europe, Scotland was in the midst of a war for independence and outside papal authority. Could Templar knights have found refuge there, perhaps even fighting alongside Robert the Bruce at Bannockburn, and hidden their hoard beneath chapels like the famously ornate Rosslyn Chapel, its stonework brimming with cryptic symbolism? Another, even more audacious theory suggests the treasure and the surviving knights themselves sailed west. Using nautical charts and knowledge gleaned from their years as Europe's first international bankers, they allegedly reached the New World long before Columbus, burying their sacred trust in places like Oak Island's infamous Money Pit. The treasure's legend inevitably fused with myths of the ultimate sacred objects. The Templars, through their long tenure in Jerusalem, were said to have discovered secrets beneath the Temple Mount. Did their treasure include the Holy Grail, the cup of Christ's Last Supper, or the Ark of the Covenant, the gilded chest holding the tablets of God's law? These were not just valuables, they were objects of divine power. The disappearance of the Templar treasure, therefore, became more than a historical heist mystery. It transformed into a spiritual quest. The Order's physical eradication created a vacuum, and into that vacuum flowed every story of hidden knowledge and lost divinity. Their missing gold became a metaphor for all the secrets the medieval world believed were just out of reach, waiting for a worthy seeker to find them. So the treasure hunt never ends because we are not really looking for coins. We are searching for proof that the greatest mysteries of faith and history are still here, buried just beneath the surface of the world we know. A treasure hunt spans continents, but the silent stone cities of the American Southwest hold a different kind of emptiness. Around the year 1300, something profound happened in the canyons and mesas of what is now the Four Corners region. The ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi, walked away from their magnificent cliff dwellings and great houses, leaving behind cities carved from the living rock. At places like Mesa Verde and Choco Canyon, they had constructed a sophisticated world. Their apartment-like complexes, tucked into sheer canyon walls, were feats of engineering. At Choco, they built a sprawling ceremonial center with great kivas and roads that stretched for miles across the desert, aligning with celestial events. Then, within a generation or two, these stone metropoles fell silent. The fires went cold, the grinding stones were still, and the echoes of community life were replaced by the relentless wind. This was not a disappearance of people into thin air, but a deliberate mass exodus from a homeland, creating the ghostly impression of a lost civilization. So why would an entire culture abandon such monumental homes? The answer lies in a perfect storm of environmental and social pressures. The most compelling force was a prolonged, catastrophic drought. Tree ring data reveals a period of extreme aridity that gripped the region for decades, a mega-drought that would have crippled agriculture. In a land where every drop of rain was precious, this extended dry spell would have withered cornfields, emptied reservoirs, and strained food supplies to the breaking point. Resource depletion likely followed. Centuries of intensive farming and gathering in a fragile desert environment may have exhausted the soil and depleted local stands of timber used for construction and fuel. As scarcity grew, so did social tension. The highly organized, perhaps theocratic, society that built Choco's great houses may have fractured under the strain. Evidence of violence appears in this period, including unburied bodies at some sites, suggesting conflict possibly erupted between communities fighting over dwindling resources, or even within them, as faith in the old ways and leaders faltered. The crucial truth, however, is that they did not vanish from the earth. The story of the ancestral Puebloans is not one of extinction, but of migration and transformation. They moved south and east, joining with other Pueblo groups along the Rio Grande and in what is now Arizona. Their knowledge, their culture, and their bloodlines continued. They became the ancestors of modern Pueblo peoples like the Hopi and the Zuni, who maintain rich oral histories that speak of these journeys. The mystery, then, is not where they went, but why they left such grandeur behind. The abandoned cities themselves became the puzzle, their silent architecture a monument to a difficult choice. They chose survival over stone, continuity over permanence. Their legacy asks us what we would hold on to when the land itself can no longer sustain our greatest dreams. The silent cities of the desert were abandoned by choice, but the Arctic ice demanded a far more terrible price. In the spring of 1845, the British Admiralty launched its most ambitious attempt yet to conquer the final frontier of maritime exploration, the elusive Northwest Passage. Two state-of-the-art vessels, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, were outfitted with every modern convenience, from steam engines to libraries of over 1,000 books. They were commanded by the experienced Sir John Franklin, a man of 69, leading 128 officers and crew. As they sailed from Greenland in July, watched by whaling ships, they were the pride of a nation confident in its mastery over nature. Then the ice closed in, and the greatest polar expedition of the Victorian age vanished from the known world. For 2 years, there was only silence. When that silence broke, it was with whispers of a nightmare. Search parties, spurred by Lady Franklin's relentless campaigning, began to find clues scattered across the barren archipelago. They discovered cairns holding cryptic notes describing the ships being trapped in ice for 19 months and the death of Sir John Franklin in June 1847. But the final message, dated April 25, 1848, was the most chilling. It reported that the remaining 105 souls had abandoned the ice-locked ships and were attempting to walk south across the frozen wilderness. Not a single man survived. The physical evidence told a harrowing tale. Searchers later found skeletons along the proposed escape route, some showing the classic signs of scurvy. But more disturbing was the forensic evidence of lead poisoning, likely from the solder used in the expedition's thousands of canned food tins. This would have caused severe weakness, mental deterioration, and organ failure, crippling the men long before the cold could finish its work. The most haunting testimony, however, came from the Inuit people who had watched the tragedy unfold. They spoke of groups of desperate, starving white men dragging boats across the ice, their mouths blackened from disease. They told of finding camps where the kettles held human remains, confirming the darkest Victorian taboo, cannibalism born of absolute desperation. For over a century and a half, the ships themselves remained lost, the final pieces of the puzzle hidden beneath the sea. Then, in a stunning modern twist, technology succeeded where Victorian grit had failed. In 2014, the wreck of HMS Erebus was found on the ocean floor. 2 years later, HMS Terror was discovered 60 miles away, remarkably preserved in the icy water. These discoveries provided profound clues, but not a simple answer. The Terror was found with its windows still intact, its helm in perfect order, suggesting it was abandoned in a controlled manner, not crushed. Artifacts recovered show the men lived on board for a long time, even making repairs before finally leaving. The ship's location suggests the men may have tried to sail them again after the ice partially released them, only to be trapped once more. The Franklin expedition stands as the ultimate cautionary tale of its age. It was a collision of supreme technological confidence with an environment that was utterly indifferent to it. The men had steam power, canned food, and the full backing of the British Empire, yet they were defeated by a toxic can of peas, a shifting maze of ice, and their own rigid adherence to a plan that the Arctic refused to honor. Their story is not just one of disappearance, but of a slow, grueling unraveling, watched by the very people whose knowledge might have saved them had they only thought to ask. The frozen silence of the Arctic is one kind of oblivion, but history also records a vanishing of the mind, a feverish disappearance into movement. In the sweltering July of 1518, on a narrow street in Strasbourg, a woman named Frau Trophia stepped out of her home and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration. Her movements were not joyful, but frantic, compulsive, a desperate and unceasing rhythm she could not control. She danced until her feet bled. She danced until she collapsed from exhaustion, only to rise and begin again. This was not an isolated fit. Within a week, dozens had joined her. Within a month, the dancing plague had consumed hundreds of the city's residents, a writhing, gasping mass of people dancing themselves to the point of injury, heart attack, and in some cases, death. The rational, orderly life of the city had simply vanished, replaced by a terrifying collective mania. The civic response was as bizarre as the phenomenon itself. City councillors, convinced the afflicted were suffering from an excess of hot blood, decided the cure was to let them dance it out. They cleared 2 market squares, built wooden stages, and even hired musicians and professional dancers to keep the afflicted moving, believing this would hasten the purge. Instead, it only fueled the epidemic, turning a medical disaster into a macabre public spectacle. Guards were posted to prevent the dancers from stopping, creating a circular hell where the only permitted escape was through more dancing. It was a catastrophic misdiagnosis, a desperate attempt to impose logic on a situation that had spiraled far beyond it. So what stole the sanity of an entire city? Historians and scientists have grappled with this for centuries. The leading explanation is mass psychogenic illness, a form of social contagion where extreme psychological stress manifests as physical symptoms. Strasbourg in 1518 was a pressure cooker of dread. The region had suffered repeated harvest failures, leading to severe famine. Syphilis was a terrifying new epidemic. Superstition ran high. In this atmosphere of collective trauma, Frau Trofia's breakdown may have provided a physical outlet for the town's unspoken panic, a somatic scream that others unconsciously mimic to express their own unbearable stress. A more physiological theory points to the bread. Ergot is a toxic fungus that grows on damp rye, a staple grain. When ingested, it can cause violent muscle spasms, hallucinations, and a burning sensation in the limbs, symptoms medieval people might describe as a compulsion to dance. An ergot outbreak, or ergotism, could explain the physical convulsions that started the plague, which then triggered a wider psychological hysteria. Yet, this theory has holes, as classic ergot poisoning usually leads to gangrene and crippling pain, not sustained, days-long physical exertion. Some view it through a religious lens as a form of collective penance or cult behavior. The dancers may have believed they were possessed by Saint Vitus, a saint associated with curing a nervous disorder, and that only by dancing could they earn his mercy and lift a curse they believed was upon them. In this view, the plague was a desperate communal ritual to make an invisible threat visible and controllable through exhausting, shared suffering. Ultimately, the dancing plague of 1518 represents the most mysterious disappearance of all, the evaporation of collective reason. It was not a physical vanishing, but a psychological one. An entire community temporarily lost its grip on reality, surrendering to a force that seemed to move through them like a wind. It shows us that the human mind, under enough pressure, can disappear into a story it tells itself, a story written not in words, but in desperate, endless, and fatal motion. 25 silences, each a different shape, but all carved from the same profound substance, the unknown. From the Roman legions swallowed by Caledonian mists to the pilot describing a craft that was not an aircraft as his engine failed, these stories trace humanity's oldest and most haunting confrontation. We build lighthouses against the dark sea, map every inch of the wilderness, and construct empires of stone and law, yet the unknown remains. It waits in a sudden desert storm, in the locked room of a political rival, in the green depths of a jungle that hides a civilization we refuse to believe was there. These disappearances, whether of a king, a child, or an entire squadron, are not failures of history. They are its essential texture. They remind us that the past is not a clean, illuminated corridor, but a landscape full of gaps and shadows, where the most important truths are often the ones we can never quite reach. They force a humbling admission that for all our records and science, the map of human experience is still dotted with places marked "Here be mysteries." So we are left not with answers, but with better questions. Which of these 25 empty spaces lingers in your mind? Is it the domestic horror of Hinterkaifeck or the cosmic riddle of the man from Tord? Perhaps you carry the ghost of another vanishing, a local legend or a family story that history books forgot. The conversation does not end here, it begins. Share your thoughts, your own theories about these cases, or the names of other historical vanishings that haunt you in the comments below. This journey into the silent chapters of our story is just one of many. If these shadows and echoes have captivated you, be sure to subscribe. We will keep exploring history's greatest enigmas because some stories, by their very design, have no end.